Good morning and welcome to Math Strategies for Students with Significant Cognitive Disabilities. We are excited to have Ms. Mo Chi here with us today. Ms. Mo Chi is an educational specialist for the Adapted Curriculum Team in the Office of Special Education Instruction for Fairfax County Public Schools. And now we'll turn it to her. Thank you, Mo.
Thank you, Nadia. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm very excited to share some strategies with you that hopefully you find helpful and can implement with your own children or child at home. So welcome to this presentation on math strategies for students with significant cognitive disabilities who access an adapted curriculum. As Nadia said, my name is Mo. I am totally open to you putting questions in the chat. If I'm able to see them and get to them in time, I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, we'll make sure we get to them, like Nadia said, at the end of the training during the Q&A time. So I am going to talk you through some helpful information that you can hopefully take home and start applying with your child when practicing math specific and other skills with your child. A few items before we get started. I know we are always working on ways to make our trainings more accessible for our participants. So if there's something that you need to help support your learning during this session, just let us know and we'll do our best to accommodate that. If you need to take a break during this time, it's pretty short, but please feel welcome to do so. And just a few of the accessibility features are here on the screen within Zoom for anyone who may need or benefit from them. If you would like to access closed captions, you have access to that here. Is an example of that for you. You can click on the closed caption menu on the black bar at the bottom of your Zoom window. And if you need to change the size or color or contrast of those captions, you can click on that little triangle next to it, and it will open the accessibility menu in Zoom to allow you to change your caption features. You can increase your font size, you can access screen readers, things like that. And then as Nadia mentioned, today's training will be recorded, so you'll have access to that at the end. So let's look at our general outcomes for today. Our objectives are that we will learn about some evidence-based practices for students with significant cognitive disabilities. So these are things that your child's teacher is likely doing every day to teach a variety of skills. We're also going to go over a few best practices for math instruction, as well as discuss early numeracy objectives to teach and related activities that you can do with your child to support these at home with items that you can easily find around the house. Finally, we'll show you some additional available resources that can either help you learn more about any of the strategies that we're going to talk about, or that you can just take and start using right away with your child at home. So before we get started, Nadia is going to pull up a poll so I can take a moment to get to know about you and your child or children in FCPS. So the first question is, in what grade band is your child currently? Elementary, middle, or high school? Some of you may be even preschool parents. If that's the case, you can kind of plop them in that elementary section. In what classroom setting does your child currently receive special education services? So are they in a classroom for students with intellectual disabilities, intellectual disabilities severe, enhanced autism? Maybe they're receiving most of their instruction in the general education setting. And then other might be perhaps if they're receiving their instruction in a mix of settings. Maybe they're receiving non-categorical services. And then the third question is, what curriculum is your child currently accessing? So the general curriculum, meaning the SOL standards of learning, adapted curriculum, the Virginia Essentialized Standards of Learning, or maybe you're not sure, or your student's not in, or your child is not in a testing year yet, in which case you can put, I'm not sure. All right, it's looking from those of you who have mentioned that we have a lot of elementary parents in here today, and many students in enhanced autism classrooms, many receiving their instruction in general education, and a mix of those who are accessing general curriculum and adapted curriculum, and some who are unsure. All right, well, great. We have a little bit of everything, and I'm happy to share with you that everything that I'm going to share today um, will apply to everyone. All right, so let's get into it. As I mentioned in the learning objectives, I'm going to show you some concrete ways to support the development of early numeracy skills with your child or children with significant cognitive disabilities. But even if your child does not have a significant cognitive disability, many of these strategies are going to be effective for them as well. Before we get into those strategies, let's spend some time discussing what skills we think are important to teach and why. So you will hear me refer to the term early numeracy, and let's talk about what that is. There are a wide range of definitions because the term early numeracy or number sense is considered differently by experts and may include slightly different skills, but we're going to use the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, or NCTM, definition, which you can see here on the screen. The NCTM defines early numeracy as the individual's ability to understand numbers and operations and use these concepts and strategies to make judgments for more complex problem solving. The five math standards that you can see on the right side of the screen are those that are identified by the NCTM as those that provide the basis for number and operation concepts, algebra, geometry, measurement, and data analysis and probability. So many of these are going to be familiar to you, some maybe not so much. This list of examples is not exhaustive, but it does consist of many of the individual skills that comprise those essential standards. So these include things like number identification, rote counting, which is the ability to count up, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Understanding that a number refers to an item or a set of items. Sometimes we call this one-to-one correspondence, right? I have one finger up right now, which also equals the numeral one. Understanding that a number of objects remain the same when they're rearranged spatially. So sometimes that's called number conservation. Understanding how to break apart and build numbers or compose and decompose numbers. Place value, early measurement concepts such as identifying things as bigger or smaller, or quantities as more or less, adding and subtracting quantities, and patterning. Of course, there are more, but these are some of the basics that we start with. So why is it so important to focus on early numeracy skills? Well, the NCTM stresses the importance of all students having mathematical competence and the ability to use math in everyday life. The math standards that they have singled out as important to teach are those that they say provide significantly enhanced opportunities and options for shaping students' futures. So we know that many early numeracy skills build the foundation in understanding math. And for many children, those mathematical thinking and reasoning skills develop really early, even in infancy, and they grow extensively during the first 5 years of life. Infants, preschool age children, they all demonstrate some really complex mathematical skills like patterning, exploring shapes, comparing sizes, counting numbers, counting objects. So when children are young, they especially need that opportunity to develop competence in numeracy because possession of those skills is going to be really indicative of their math success later on, for all children. So while many early numeracy skills do develop before children have any type of formal schooling, there are some children who may not have these critical skills yet due to a variety of factors. Maybe they have a lack of experiences or exposure within their environment. Perhaps it is cultural or educational. Or in the case of the students that we're talking about today, children with significant cognitive disabilities, because of a slow developmental progression. So for these children, it's really important to provide more intensive interventions that are explicitly going to teach those lacking early numeracy skills, beginning in kindergarten and extending through elementary and secondary schooling. So it's never going to be too late to teach these strategies and skills to our students. The math curriculum programs that we use in FCPS provide these intensive interventions by combining math skills from early child mathematics research plus evidence-based teaching strategies for students with significant cognitive disabilities. So when I refer to evidence-based practices, these are simply specific ways of teaching that have been shown to have a positive effect on student outcomes and are backed by research. So we're going to talk about some of these evidence-based practices now, and then we'll talk about how they link up and apply to how we should teach those early numeracy skills. So this slide provides a highlight of the strategies that we're going to discuss when putting instructional practices in place with children with significant cognitive disabilities. We're going to talk about the type of response a child might be able to provide, the use of a strategy called model lead test, the use of time delay procedures, implementation of wait time, and prompting. So we're going to look at all of these practices with examples in the next few slides. So an important first step before beginning instruction is to identify the child's most reliable response mode. There are a variety of response modes, and just like we as typically developing adults have multiple response modes, so might our children. So we'll just use this as a little bit of a guide. Some examples might be for a child who does not have vocal speech and maybe has limited or no movement in their arms or head, we might consider using eye gaze as a method of responding. So this would require the child to have good vision, to have the ability to clearly look towards a choice placed in their visual field. And that might be the best way for them to be able to make choices or respond to questions that are presented to them. Alternately, a child who perhaps does not have difficulty with motor control is able to use their hands and arms, but who struggles to express themselves vocally or verbally might use a point, touch, or grab response. And this is something we see very, very often with our students with significant cognitive disabilities. They might point to or touch what they want to show us or to make responses to questions that we ask them. And then perhaps you have a child who is able to express themselves vocally with their voice or maybe verbally, but using an augmentative communication device. And that would be considered a verbal response, even if they're using their device to respond. So as I mentioned, children may respond using any one of the modes on this slide, or even a combination of the three, Or there may even be others that they are using to respond that aren't mentioned here. All right. One thing to think about is that children who are just beginning to access augmentative and alternative communication or AAC devices may be learning their device, but they may not yet be fluent in it. So if a child is just beginning to access it and can only communicate very basic wants or needs, it might, for the purpose of instruction, make more sense to use a point, touch, or grab response as they're getting more familiar with the use of their device. Or a child with limited physical abilities might be working on moving their arms or head in the direction of a response, but they're going to be perhaps more fluent with using eye gaze. Maybe they're going to provide more quicker or purposeful responses as they build their motor planning. So we're really looking at total communication the most that we can, but still trying to narrow what response mode will get us the most accurate indication of a student's needs and preferences, in addition to how can they demonstrate their knowledge of specific topics. So it's possible that you have already identified that most accurate response mode in your child, and that's wonderful. If you know your child's most accurate response mode and you feel comfortable putting that in the chat, I'd be very interested in knowing what you use at home. So I see some people indicated their child is verbal, so they're able to use their voice. Ah, someone indicated their child writes their answers. Absolutely. Points, AAC device. Sometimes children will even type out their responses in an AAC device versus just picking the picture supports. Just starting to use verbal language. Amazing. And pointing. Verbal. Thank you so much. Great. If you have a child that you're still working to figure out that response mode, that is a-okay. We understand the reality, and definitely would recommend continuing to have those conversations with your child's teacher, with a speech pathologist, with assistive technology services, if you have one in your child's classroom or who is supporting your child within FCPS. These are all really great resources. We do also have a handout in your packet called Determining Response Mode, and it provides a really, really simple process that can help you make the determination of what might be your child's most accurate response mode. I know that it's not always so easy to determine it. Children are not one-dimensional. The process can take time, it can take experimentation, it can take direct instruction to get right. But this is really going to be the first step in being able to identify what your child knows and what they don't know academically. And that can be a really, really powerful tool. Of course, communication is the most important thing that we can teach our children. So I always start there, even though it doesn't necessarily relate directly to math instruction. It has a huge impact on it. So I'm going to show you a quick video example that highlights the different ways children may need to respond to questions and choices. And this does relate to a math lesson. So let's hope this pulls up.
Can you help me find the number 3? Good job, Erwin. Very good. Good looking. Ava, can you show me the number 1? Good looking. You found the number 1. Davion, can you find the number 4? Good try. Let's choose one answer. Can you show me 4? Good looking. I see you're looking at 4. Good touching, Davion. Let's see if Chandler can find the number 3. 3. Good job, Chandler. 3.
All right, so hopefully that shows you there a couple of different examples of how in one classroom alone, there are a variety of response modes: eye gaze, pointing, touching, matching, that children can use to make their wants and needs known and also to communicate their responses. So this is very, similar to what you might see in a classroom of students with significant cognitive disabilities in our county. So once a reliable response mode has been determined, we can, jump more fully into instruction. Model lead test is an evidence-based teaching procedure that you may more commonly know as I do, we do, you do. In model lead test, you are first going to model what you want the child to do by saying something like, watch me, and then demonstrating the task. Then you would guide the child through practice together with you, and that's the do it with me, or we do. And then after you have modeled and practiced together, then that last step is the test, or you do, and that requires the child to practice the skill independently without your assistance. This is probably something that you do at home without even realizing it on a daily basis, and something I think that we all do in general education or special education settings with children when we teach. So I'm going to show you a snippet of a video where, again, you can see this practice in action. And you can see how the instructor in this case moves from a very I do method to a you do. Give me a second because I'm going to pull this over to.
Today we're going to do some math story problems. The first kind of problem we'll learn about is called a group problem. Let's all say group.
As a group.
Nice. In a group problem, we're going to combine or add 2 small groups to make one big group. I have a rule to help us remember what a group problem is.
Let me scroll to where I want it to be.
Because we're going to make sets. We need to make sets to see how many are in each small group. Use your counting cubes to make sets and your graphic organizer. You're going to pretend your cubes are the crabs and the fish. How many counting cubes go in the first circle? How many?
Just 2 crabs.
2 crabs, and you told me that crabs were going to be green, right?
Green.
And fish are going to be purple?
Yes, it may.
Okay, so how many counting cubes go here?
That's 2.
2. Make a set of 2 in the circle to show how many crabs there are. You're gonna watch me first.
Me?
1
and 2.
2. Now it's your turn. Can you put 2 crabs in your circle?
Is 1 or 2?
2.
Too small.
Yep.
Then it's the green one.
You made a set of 2 in your circle to show how many crabs there were. Now we need to make the next small group. How many counting cubes should we place in this one?
Me?
How many cubes go in this one?
3 fishes.
3. Watch me. We need to make a set of 3. Here I go. 1, 2, 3. 3 fish. Now it's your turn. Can you make a set of 3?
See?
Great. We have finished step 11, so let's check it off.
What time? 12. Please?
Yep, the next one is 12.
It's the rest of the problem uses the answer.
Solve the problem and write the answer is step 12. Okay, let's read our number sentence from before. 2 plus
3
3
exercise
equals The last box is going to tell us the answer to how many animals did Ava see at the beach? So let's solve the problem. Use your hand motions and say the group rule with me one more time. Ready? Small group, small group.
I said it.
Yeah, you can do it with
Small
me.
group.
Small group,
Small group.
combine into big
Yeah,
group.
sorry, big group.
Yeah, so it's time to combine or add our small groups together into one big group. Then we will count to find out how many animals Ava saw at the beach.
A beach.
Okay,
right?
watch me first. One, two, three, four, five. 5 animals. I'm going to write it on my number sentence. Your turn. You're going to combine the counting cubes of your 2 small groups into one big group and count them. Can you do it?
2.
First you move them,
A move.
and then move those. And now how many do you have?
5.
Yeah, you have 5. So you have 5 for your number sentence.
See? Yep.
Yep. So how many animals did Ava see at the beach? How many animals?
5.
Yeah, 5. Okay, guess what?
What?
We did it. You finished all of the steps. Let's
Okay, so again, there hopefully what you were able to see is a combination of modeling, we do, and independent responses. Another similar yet highly effective procedure is called time delay. So time delay is a method of systematically providing prompting and then fading that prompting away. Using time delay reduces errors and increases success. So when we are teaching a new skill, we start with what is called a 0-second delay. When we use a 0-second delay, we give a direction and immediately point to or prompt in some way the correct response. So for example, if I am teaching a child number operations like you see here on this screen, or mathematical operations like plus, minus, equals, etc., we would show the child each operation and give the instructional direction, point to plus. And so you can see that red arrow coming in and pointing to the plus sign at the exact same time that we ask the direction. If I was in person with a child, I would probably just take my finger and point directly to it. That is called a 0-second time delay because there are 0 seconds between when I ask the question and when I provide that prompt. So sometimes we call this errorless learning. All right, there's no chance for the child to answer incorrectly, and that's okay. That's our simple, effective first step. As we continue to teach the skill, we want to consider how long we might need to provide instruction at a 0-second delay. And this is going to depend on each individual child's rate of learning and rate of progress. So research tells us that children with significant cognitive disabilities often need 60 or more repetitions to learn a concept. So there may be some children who are at that 0-second delay for quite some time. That being said, we do not want children to be at an errorless learning level forever. We want them to increase in their ability to provide independent and correct responses. So we would then move to what's called a 3 to 5-second delay or a several second delay. And here again, we would present the options, give the direction, point to plus, and then wait approximately 3 to 5 seconds to allow the child to provide an independent response. And this is where that consideration of wait time is going to come in as well. Wait time is going to depend on each child and their processing or physical ability. So some children are going to need much more wait time, and some children are going to need less. So if you have a child who needs to take a long time to move their hand or their head to the correct response, we're going to give more wait time. If we have a child who's using an AAC device, we are going to provide more wait time because we have to think about the fact that we're asking a question. The child needs to process that question in their head. They need to formulate their response. And then they need to identify where to find that response on their communication device. So sometimes with children who are using devices, we need to give them up to 10 seconds of wait time in order to make a response. And I don't know if you've ever counted 10 seconds in your head, but that is a long time. I'm sorry, I keep unsharing by accident. What? Here we go. All right. Another really valid and effective teaching strategy to use with any child is the use of prompting. So again, we're going to use these daily with our children, and we probably do, even with our typically developing children. I know I use them on a regular basis to get my child to get dressed in the morning. So there are a wide variety of prompts and what that one might provide, and these are just a couple examples of it. You could use physical, gestural, verbal, proximity prompts where you put yourself a little bit closer to the child. But here are a few of the most commonly used ones that we're going to talk about today. So starting with physical prompts. Here, an adult might use physical contact to teach a correct response. This is often considered the most intrusive prompt that you can provide. And physical prompts are usually used for teaching routines like hand washing, where you might actually, take your child's hands and put them under the water and have them rub the soap into their hands and rinse all the soap off. You might actually, for a young child or a child who's just learning that skill, physically help them with that task. But it can be used in a variety of ways for a variety of different tasks. We are often going to use this type of prompt with early learners or when we're teaching a brand new skill. And then over time, depending on the skill, we might be able to fade that prompt away to maybe just a partial physical prompt. So an example might be if you're teaching a child to count objects using one-to-one correspondence. Initially, you might physically hold their finger and use it to touch each object as you count. But then over time, you might be able to fade that prompt and maybe guide their finger to the first object, but then they might be able to continue counting without that physical prompt from you. So physical prompting can be a really, really effective method of prompting for certain skills and for early learners. The use of visual prompts is also widely used. Here, the adult would provide some sort of visual, like an object or a picture, or maybe even the use of color coding to draw the child's attention to the correct response. So some examples would include asking a child to find maybe all of the triangles on a page that includes many different shapes, and putting a little visual of a triangle above the page for them to refer to as a visual prompt. Or maybe you're going to have the child sort numbers 1 through 5 into different containers, and you might outline each number with a different color that matches the color of the container that they are placing the numbers into. So that color coding would be a visual prompt as well. And then gestural prompts are ones I think that we use all the time and don't even realize. Here, the adult is going to make some sort of gesture to prompt a response. So sometimes we do this when we're having kids line up or push their chair in, and we might say, come line up and point to where we want them to stand. An example with math might be tapping a ruler when you're having a child measure something so that they know the tool that they need to use to find the answer. So gestural prompts are really, really common as well. Again, if you feel comfortable entering into the chat, can you think of other types of prompts that you have used or use with your children on a regular basis? It doesn't even have to be math related. What are some prompts you give your kids when you're even helping them get ready in the morning? Audio, like a timer. Yes. I used to do this with my daughter on the playground. Hey, babe, when you hear the timer go off, that's when it's time to come back over. We got to go home. She doesn't. They rarely do. It's usually used when they're trying to move from something preferred to unpreferred. Physical and gesture, absolutely. Sometimes we'll use verbal prompts, right? Hey, I'm going to count us down. By the time I get to 1, it's time, you should be in your next station. Visual and gestural. Yeah. Modeling. Yeah. Perfect. A model prompt is very important. Yes, moving to a non-preferred physical location sometimes requires a little bit of that physical prompt, right? Absolutely. Thank you all for your participation. All right, so I just threw a lot of different strategies at you. So here's a little recap of them. And also, just before I get to this, I will say you do have a handout in your packet of different types of prompts that you might use to teach specific skills to your child. And just know too that generally, we want to use the least amount of prompting necessary for our child to be successful. So if we've seen our child do something multiple times with just a gestural prompt, maybe we don't need to start at a physical prompt with them. And we always want to consider how we can fade those prompts away over time so that our children don't become dependent on them. Our whole goal is for them to become independent with all of these skills over time. All right. So we might need to consider how much time does our child need at each level of prompting before we can start to kind of fade that away and allow them to do it on their own. So that prompting resource that you have in your guide is very helpful for helping you consider all of those options. So let's think about different questions that we might want to ask ourselves to see if we're putting some of these practices in place with our child at home. So first of all, do I know how my child communicates or responds best? Right? Is it pointing, grabbing, touching, pulling, looking, turning their head, using AAC, typing, saying? Right? How do they communicate best? We want to try to get them towards the most effective communication response mode for them, but sometimes we have to start with where they are and work our way up. Another question is, am I modeling tasks for my child before I expect them to do something independently? I think this is a really, really big one. Sometimes we expect because of a child's age or because we've seen them do something else that they automatically know how to do something or that they understand our verbal directions, but they may not. They may need that modeling or that prompt before they're able to move on to doing it independently. We might also think about with what skills do we need to use those time delay practices to teach? And this kind of goes back to that modeling, right? How much time does my child need at the 0 second delay where I just give them that answer? I don't let them learn anything but the correct answer before they're able to show more independent responses. And how much wait time does my child need to process my question, right? And physically respond? Again, sometimes we have a lot going on in our lives. We might ask a question, and I know I do this again with my own daughter. I'll ask her something and she won't respond for a long time. So I'll repeat my question, then I'll repeat it again. And she's really just thinking about what her response is. She needs a little bit more time to process it, right? So we need to give our children the courtesy of processing time. And then again, what type of prompt does my child need to be successful at a particular task or skill? And how can I fade that prompt over time to allow my child to demonstrate more independent responses? So, all things to take into consideration as we're teaching any skill. All right. So now that we are familiar with some more general strategies and evidence-based practices to use in supporting children with significant cognitive disabilities and learning any skill, let's look at some best practices in teaching math. So some of you may have heard of this. It is called the Concrete Representational Abstract, or CRA sequence. This is an evidence-based practice supported by research, and it's presented as a framework in which case the concrete, representational, or pictorial, as you might see here, and abstract forms of math work collaboratively to help facilitate deeper understanding of math concepts. So the CRA framework displayed here considers children's diverse learning needs by using supports when necessary. So children with learning disabilities, and really all children, require varied levels of support, and this framework represents that. Some children may require more practice with concrete forms. So you can see here that concrete refers to the use of manipulatives or physical objects in teaching. And then others may benefit from a combination of concrete and pictorial or picture support to access learning. And then, of course, the goal is going to be that those numerical representations or math symbols and equations are going to eventually be what we're getting our children to. It's important to make really explicit connections among all three levels of understanding throughout instruction. So let's dig into each piece of this framework. So the first piece is concrete, and this is often thought of as the doing stage, which uses concrete objects to model problems. So in the concrete stage, we begin instruction by modeling each mathematical concept with concrete materials. And that refers to the use of three-dimensional, hands-on materials and objects that children can touch and move to promote understanding of different concepts and procedures. So it includes hands-on formal manipulatives that you would see in a school building, like fraction bars, algebra tiles, tangrams, geoboards, two-colored counters. But it can also refer to hands-on manipulatives that are less formal and that you can find at home. So things like straws or paper clips or cardboard boxes, egg cartons, things like that. You can find these type of items around your house, and you can encourage your children to even help find these items to help with skill practice at home. So these type of concrete physical materials are what students with significant cognitive disabilities are really going to spend a lot of their time accessing in order to develop understanding of early numeracy concepts. So interaction with these concrete materials is going to enhance retention of procedural steps in math problem solving, and it will allow children at the elementary and secondary level to take in and retrieve information in a variety of ways. So a lot of times we think of this only used at the elementary level, but it can be really, really effective for secondary level students as well. So here is an example of what concrete representation could look like using base 10 blocks to represent a number. So here you can see there are 4 10s in the base 10 blocks and 5 1s in the base 10 blocks. The use of those concrete items are going to be maybe where you start in teaching this particular skill to a student. So what could I use to teach this skill if I didn't have things like base 10 blocks at home? Well, let's look at some different options. One of the handouts that you have received is called Math Manipulatives at Home, and that can give you a really good place to start when identifying materials needed to teach math concepts. So again, you can get creative in finding things at home that can replace the typical manipulatives that children might be used to at school. The list that is provided for you is not all-encompassing. It can be modified to fit unique objects or items that you might have around your home. So definitely ways, I know when we were in virtual learning, definitely ways to get creative and find things around the house to teach those skills to your students. And we provided that information during that virtual learning time too. Are there items that you might think of that you use at home with your children to teach or practice specific math skills? If so, you can feel free to put them in the chat. Yeah, colored buttons, beads, Mario Brothers characters. I love that, incorporating your child's interests into it. Like, hey, we're going to count all of our little cars right now. Yep, small toys that interest them. Pasta, yeah. Perfect, like dried pasta. Perfect. Gummy bears, yes. Finger food. And then they get to eat it all at the end, and that's the fun part too. Money, coins. Yeah, real coins. There's so many manipulatives that you can find at home to teach particular skills. You don't need fancy programs or any of those formal school manipulatives in order to teach these. Perfect. You guys are very creative. So hopefully that handout will give you a couple more ideas as well. So moving on to the next piece of the framework, the representational or pictorial. This is sometimes referred to as the seeing stage because it uses representations of objects to model problems. So in this stage, we transform the concrete model into a representational or semi-concrete level, which may involve things like drawing pictures, using circles or dots or tallies, using stamps to imprint pictures for counting. And it can also refer to the use of virtual manipulatives. So here again, we see our example of the same problem using the representational piece. So here it's drawings to represent the same number that the concrete objects are representing. So we have included a couple of different virtual manipulative resources in your handouts. And actually, I'm going to see if my computer cooperates with me so that I can pull them up for you to see. One of them is called the National Library of Virtual Manipulatives, And this is a digital library containing activities for K through 12 math concepts. So topics covered include things like numbers and operations, algebra, geometry, measurement, data analysis, and probability. So you can see if I pull something up, hopefully everyone's seeing what I'm pulling up here. You can see all of these different virtual manipulatives that you can use. If I'm teaching my child different attributes, uh-uh. It might take a minute, but it should pull up an activity that you can do with your child to help them sort objects by different attributes. So here, for example, it says all the blocks inside have the same shape, color, or size. Which blocks belong inside? And so I can see that they're all squares, and I can pull those squares in, right? So these are really fun, easy to use, quick. You literally just pull up the website, virtual manipulatives that you can use to teach or practice certain skills. Here is another one right here. This was created by TTAC, the Training and Technical Assistance Center, and it has a variety of different virtual manipulatives like Unifix cubes, counting bears, tangrams, money clocks. So you have access to these in your, or this website in your handout too. So you can pull it up and start practicing some of these skills with your child. All right. Okay. I am going to copy and paste this directly into the chat so that you have it. But you have, again, those links in your notes too, in your handouts. So moving on, finally to this abstract, you can see that this is the last piece in that framework. It is considered the symbolic stage, in which we model the mathematical concept at a symbolic level using numbers, notation, mathematical symbols to represent the number algorithm. And we use operations, right? Operation symbols like plus, minus, equals, etc., to indicate addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. And that can also consist of words. 15 equals 110 and 5 ones. Once children have an understanding of the concrete and the representational, they're able to move on to that more abstract level. So here is our last example of what an abstract representation could look like using words or using numerals to represent the number. So overall, CRA methods provide an opportunity for increased interaction with content and increased frequency of response for all children. It can be implemented at all grade levels, individually, in small groups, and large groups, provided that children are given multiple opportunities for practice and demonstration in order to achieve mastery of that mathematical concept. And a lot of our children are going to spend a lot of time at the concrete and representational stage, and that is a-okay if that's where they are and that's what they need. And then finally, another great strategy to embed into math instruction is the use of story-based lessons or read-alouds. And these help to build context around math concepts. So they are more than just word problems. They can create a theme that can be used to introduce multiple numeracy concepts. They also provide an opportunity for students to develop an awareness of math that is around them in their daily lives in everyday settings. Of course, they are also a great way to build and maintain engagement around math instruction. So what you see here on the screen are some examples of math stories in what's called Math Start books. I have included a link to the Math Start website in your handouts, but I'm going to take you to the website really quickly too. Unfortunately, these are not a free resource. You would have to purchase the books if you are interested in them. But I can pull one up and show you that once you do have the books, anyone that you might want to pull up, say comparing sizes, they include a list of activities that you can download and do with your child. So maybe you're going to read the story and then you're going to refer to these cool activities or download the activities here that align with that math concept. So it's a really, really great way, especially for any children who are very into story time and read alouds, to engage your students in those math concepts from an early age. All right, so you do have a link to that website in your handouts. So a couple of additional resources that you have in your handouts. Again, I will pull right up for you, are just some things that I have created and that were really helpful to a lot of families, again, during that virtual learning time, um, that help to highlight some of the early numeracy skills that we've talked about and those evidence-based practices that we've learned about today with, again, materials that you can use at home. So the way this handout is set up is it highlights the activity that you might work on or that math objective or early numeracy skill. It talks about what materials you might need in order to teach that. And then it gives you sort of like a script of how to present that math skill to your student or your child and what type of response you're looking for. One that I really love as an example is using something like an empty egg carton to teach the concept of one-to-one correspondence. So again, here you can use any of those objects that you mentioned in the chat or that are listed here to work with your child on just placing one object in each egg carton to teach the concept of one-to-one correspondence. All right. So tons and tons of ideas that you can just take right away and start using. And then at the bottom, you have some additional math activities that you can incorporate into everyday routines at home. So while you're cooking, have your child help you to measure as you are doing things in your daily life. Point out what time it is with your child on an analog or a digital clock, right? Ways that you can really show your child that math is all around them and they can learn those skills in real world settings too, so that they actually have meaning to them. As I mentioned, tons and tons of other resources in your, gosh, sorry to keep going back and forth on you all. Here are some of those additional resources, your handouts. This one right here goes over definitions of each of the topics that we discussed. So all of those math standards and their meanings. Here's a description of the concrete representational abstract sequence. Here's an article where you can learn more about it. And then resources that cover a variety of different skills. Again, all of these are ones, most of these are ones that are free that you can just go ahead and click on. This one will take you to vocabulary cards. Here are the links to the 2 virtual manipulative sites that I shared. Here is the link to the Math Start books. And then these ones here, these math ebooks, interactive activities, all these games and worksheets, they're all free. So you can just click on them and start using them again right away with your child, depending on what type of skills they are working on in school that you might want to reinforce. And then this one right here just gives you some general strategies on identifying response modes, using model lead test, using time delay, and then using prompting to teach any of those skills. So hopefully, within all of these resources here, you have a really, really solid start for getting going with some math practice and instruction at home with your children.